So my first question is, what made you put your name forward as a candidate for the leader of the Green Party of Canada?
Actually, the thing that really triggered me was that, I mean, we were all excited about the new leadership and what the potential was. And I was very interested to hear what other Greens wanted, what qualities they wanted to see in leaders and who they had in mind. And it actually surprised me that people were putting forward names like Naomi Klein and, you know, David Suzuki, people who are well recognized, have a lot of name recognition, have had a lot of success in their area, but wouldn't necessarily be Greens. You know, they'd have to be convinced to run as they're not necessarily politicians, didn't necessarily have an understanding of the party and the history of the party, even to some small degree. So it was a challenge. And my reaction was, well, you know, I think we should be focusing on growing Greens from within the party. We have like an amazing group of candidates who have a lot of experience over the past years. We should be looking more at, you know, growing that leadership from within the party. And I've always been a very grassroots person with a lot of experience in volunteering and in very flat organizations, non-hierarchical, with the exception of the military, which is excessively hierarchical. And I started looking at some of the issues that were being shared about people's experiences in the last campaign, things that worked, things that didn't work. You know, I wanted to learn for our own campaign, and so I started reaching out to other campaigns, and we started to see a pattern of experiences and what I consider symptoms. And so we started tracing them back to the roots and started to see that there were some structural challenges within the party that need to be addressed. So I started working with a group of grassroots Greens on a proposal for council, really got into the nitty-gritty and talking to people with lots of history in the party, giving us some background on why we're where we are at now, and started talking to some amazing people who have such a depth of knowledge and training in organizational structure and growing organizations, grassroots organizations. So we came up with a proposal for federal council, and we sent that into federal council after we had got some signatures and such on it. And during that process was really when I decided that I would be interested in putting my name forward, because I thought that these issues really needed to be discussed with Greens across Canada. We needed the opportunity to be able to connect Greens in different EDAs across Canada. We all seem to be working in our own little silos, and the complaint that I heard most often was people felt they were alone, that they didn't have a support system around them. They were starting from scratch. They didn't know who to reach out to. You know, whenever they reached out to national, it was, oh, here's the organizer's toolkit. And for somebody new, it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot of information there, and the videos are very useful, but there needs to be roadmaps for people to be able to go and say, you know, I need to do this. I need to set up an EDA. What are the steps I need to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And that's not there yet. I'm hoping that will be work that will be done. There's a lot of people who identify that as a challenge. But there was just a lot of organizational things. And that's where I have a lot of experience is with the organizational structure, and being an airframe technician. I'm very much about debugging a system, you know, tracing down what the problems are back to the root cause, and very much about systems solutions. For my object-oriented programming is all about not reinventing the wheel, not duplicating effort, and being efficient. So all of those tendencies of mine all kind of come together to ideas and solutions that I think will work to help fix those internal challenges that we have in the party. And I love a challenge.
So somebody had a question. Brian Beaton had a question. Do you want to ask that question?
Sure. I just, I've just read the email from the Green Party of Canada's about the new executive director in Ottawa.
Yes.
And I was just wondering if you've had a chance to meet him. I was really impressed with his responses to those questions, and I hope everyone has a chance to read it, because but I've never met him and I haven't got a clue, but it sounds like we're in for an opportunity to explore how we can diversify the party.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering about like your relationship with the headquarters, but also
Mhm.
with this particular gentleman.
Absolutely. We've been kind of waiting with bated breath. We knew that the process was ongoing. We knew that there were some very good candidates put forth. We knew that we had some good people on the team that was making those hiring decisions off of federal council. And we've had little tidbits coming back as to what their priorities and such were. And when he was hired, everybody was a mad scramble to find information about him because we had his name, but we didn't have anything else. And so when the announcement was made a week or so ago, I reached out to him just to introduce myself and to welcome him aboard. And I was very impressed with how accessible he was and how quick he was to just enter into a little bit of a chat. And I'm one of the moderators for EDA 2.0 now. They kind of co-opted me for that. And he is now a part of that group as well. And we're looking forward to him having that input there and opening up that group a little bit more for more Greens across Canada to be able to look at how we can optimize and build on the good work that's been done in all the different EDAs. And so I haven't had a chance to read that. I just saw it come into the inbox, but I'm really looking forward to reading more about him. I've seen his CV. He has some very impressive experience, and I think that the hiring committee did a good job. And I'm really excited moving forward. And my understanding is that there are people on federal council that are working really hard to make sure that he has time with both our group who did the proposal for federal council and the MGNR group who did the survey that went around recently, and they've been doing the videos. So we're really excited that he is open to having those discussions with members. I think that that's going to be really critical moving forward.
Cool. So what have what has been your challenges in this campaign?
Challenges. Well, one of the biggest challenges is that nobody outside of Nova Scotia really knows who I am. You know, we were really looking forward to being able to travel across Canada, and of course, with COVID-19, that's been a challenge. The raising funds is definitely a challenge in the face of COVID-19. I've done a lot of work with poverty and anti-poverty groups and food security, and that's my world. That's where my base is, and unfortunately they've been hit very, very hard. And people who normally I'd be able to rely on for donations are small businesses who have no revenue, so the owners have no money coming in. You know, we're having challenges raising the funds, but now in a kind of perverse way, COVID-19's given us more flexibility with Zoom and with these types of calls to potentially reach even more people. Oops, sorry, we've got some more people coming in. I'm talking and I'm not adding people. So perversely, we have more opportunity to be able to see and reach out to more people on Zoom across the country that wouldn't necessarily even be able to come in and visit us if we had traveled to a location and we're meeting at a coffee house. So my hope is that we'll actually be able to connect with more Greens across Canada using less carbon than we would in a traditional campaign across the country.
Okay, thank you very much. So my next question is, what is your vision for the Green Party of Canada?
My vision for the Green Party, it's interesting because I kind of slid in sideways looking at the internal structure and issues there, but my vision for the party itself is within 8 years, I think we should be official opposition, and I don't see a reason why we couldn't do that. But the trick to doing that, anytime you set goals, is you set what your goal is, then you figure out what you have to achieve at each benchmark in order to achieve that goal. So we have to hit official party status in the next election. But in order to do that, we have to have active, empowered, passionate EDAs that are fully functional in every single riding. And we need to be supporting each other in the efforts going forward. There's a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge in this party that we need to organize it and structure it so that that information is shared amongst EDAs. And it might be a mentorship problem, you know, organizational structure. So we may have an existing EDA mentoring a newer EDA, or it might be on a person-by-person basis, or we might be having mentorship with you know, people that we're wanting to have more diverse inclusion. So perhaps we would have more youth mentorships or First Nations mentorships, or you know, any of the racialized communities, so that they have a connection and feel safe, because feeling safe is going to be what's going to attract people. People aren't going to hang around if they don't feel safe. And I know women who are feeling not safe in some circumstances in the Green Party. So we have a lot of work that we need to be able to do.
Thank you very much. What do you see as the role as the leader?
Well, first and foremost, with the Green Party, the role of the leader is to be the spokesperson for the party, to be able to clearly articulate the policy and the platform planks of the party, also to be able to inspire the membership and to help facilitate the team, to make sure that we are not dividing and fracturing, which is what's happening right now. We need to be able to be to really work through those growing pains and be respectful of how everybody feels and what their opinions are, but to really get that vision of what our group goals are, what are our goals, and to help each and every person in the party to be able to align their personal goals with those group goals. So we stop working in different directions. You know, we all have unconscious biases, and oftentimes they're unconscious even to ourselves. You know, we have unconscious agendas, things that we do to protect ourselves, to protect our job perhaps, or to protect our position. And until we understand that this is what we're doing, often those behaviors that go along with that work in opposition to actually achieving that goal. So having that understanding, and that's what I did my master's thesis in computer science on, was because I was working with a lot of very brilliant people who didn't necessarily have the greatest interpersonal skills. And so we worked on a kind of a structure of organizing to be able to explain group theory to computer scientists and help them understand why they were having problems working in groups to be more efficient. And we had tremendous success with that. And that's where I presented papers at international conferences and such. So there's a lot of experience that goes into that, a lot of understanding the psychology of individuals, and a lot of respect, and being able to listen to people and be able to integrate complex and diverse ideas and perspectives into one cohesive direction that we can all pull in. So that's my goal.
Okay, thank you. There's one person waiting, and I don't know how to add them.
Thank you. I will add them in.
Grant Penton.
Great. Excellent. So for those who just joined us, Sheila has a few pre-prepared questions, but she's watching the chat as well to see if there are questions that you want to ask, or even just to have your hand up, and she will put you in a queue of people who she will ask, and you can ask your question live.
And John Rice, is it Rice? Has a question to ask.
Yeah.
Reese. Hi, John.
Hi. Well, the question I had is to say I'm the CEO of my EDA, and what I'm looking at is what do we do to go and strengthen the EDAs? Because when I started, I couldn't get any information on how I should organize, how should I get things done.
That is such a common response. You know, I think we're all at that point at one point or another. And I know our organizer is amazing. Marlene Wells is the organizer for our area, but she's looking after like literally hundreds of EDAs. And I don't know, most people are a little hesitant to use her perhaps to the full extent, but she's a wealth of information, but we need to be helping each other. You know, this is where we need to be reaching out and saying, you know, we would like to know more about this. Or
Mhm.
like recently, one of the things that we did, because I'm active with the Nova Scotia Greens as well, I'm the regional rep for Fundy Shore, and we reached out to Jenica Atwin's campaign and asked her campaign managers to do a Zoom call like this, just the like tips and tricks from a winning campaign.
Right.
You know, an hour and a half, we got a wealth of information just from that simple ask. And, you know, when you ask people for their opinion or for help, they are usually very eager to step forward and offer it, but they're not going to necessarily offer it without that ask. So it would be nice to have a bit of a structure to have that happen.
Right.
But, you know, even having conversations like this and talking about what we can do in between elections, because historically, I know in our area, we've ramped up for the election and then kind of gone away until the provincial election, which is usually 2 years later, and then we go away and we're back for the next federal election. Yeah. And yet there's so much we can be doing in between.
Yeah, when I started out, it appeared from reading and talking to people, it seems that you have the election, you run the campaign, then you fold everything up and put it away for another 4 years.
Exactly. And to me, that's like taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And we're not going to get ahead with that. You know, one of the things that I identified that didn't work well in my last campaign here in West Nova was that we didn't have enough volunteers trained to have a good ground game. We didn't get to near as many doors as we needed to. And one of the things that we can do in the ensuing time is actually build our team, because part of team building is actually there's that social structure as well, that getting to know each other, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and that building that trust within the team. So organizing fun activities around learning how to do things like Canvas and getting over that nervousness about talking to somebody, whether it's a phone canvas or on the door, do some role playing, just have some fun with it. And get around that, use a few tools. You know, we did, they're called issues cards. Elizabeth uses them in her writing as well. And how we do that to start a conversation at the doorway. And when you are listening, it's not so intimidating as a canvasser, because you're not the one having to talk about platform and policy. You're listening to what the constituents are needing you to hear. And then you walk away from that door and they feel heard, and you have potentially a way of connecting back to them. And the canvassers have fun. Like I had a couple canvassers who'd never done anything like this before and were really nervous about it. And we did I like to call it wave canvassing, because we're in the Maritimes, right? And they came away from it having a lot of fun. And that's what we want to do. We want to make being green fun, and that will attract more people as well. And it just can't be endless meetings, because that'll drive people away in a heartbeat. So we just need to have ways of learning the information that we need to, bringing in the support when we need to, and having clear ways of communication. I hope that answers your question. And you're not alone. You're really not alone. A lot of people in different EDAs are feeling the same way. As I
say, the EDAs have to get together and help each other.
That's what I think, yeah, because we can't rely on staff. You know, I get a little discouraged because great ideas come up with our grassroots groups, and then they get sent to national, like, oh yeah, you know, national should be doing this, and absolutely it'd be great if national can do this, but national only has money for a certain number of staff, and that those staff are busy. So we need to find ways of working with national and working with the staff so that we can augment that. You know, we've got 20,000 members. If we could even, you know, mobilize 2,000 of those in different efforts that can magnify what staff is doing, and have staff oversight, or have, you know, a liaison perhaps through, depending on what you're doing, through the shadow cabinet, be the point person. There's a number of different ways you can structure those types of working groups in order to get work done that then can be implemented and approved before it's shared with the rest of the party.
Can I add to that? It's such
Sure.
an important, I think. and it's great how you answered it. I'm also just such a big fan. So I'm a physicist. I like the, distributed systems.
Yes,
and,
absolutely. I'm
so
trying to not talk about mesh networks because in my mind it's a mesh network, right?
So I think this is so important. There are groups and they're talking and we got great ideas for other people. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel at the moment, there's a lot of discussions about it. And it's sometimes the central party is like, oh, but then we lose our, we like grip on things or something like this. But it's not the case. So we a lot of us were inspired by Bernie Sanders, where Judy, you said, the leader should inspire. We should all, the central party should be there to inspire.
Yes.
And we are all, we are trusted. We are all on the same line. It's not. So I'm a big fan that if we can organize it and encourage people really to talk to each EDA, each other, and it has to go through the central party. The central party actually should facilitate to that we can directly
absolutely. I agree with you, Thomas. And I think at this point in time, with the current structure, we may have to demonstrate that this is possible, because I'm getting a whole lot of, oh, we can't do that. And that reminds me of when I was a young programmer and I was working in a high-tech startup in Ottawa, and we were doing distributed AI across networks and stuff that had never been done before. And I was asked to do something that just blew my mind away. And I was like, well, I can't do that. And bless his heart, but my supervisor said to me, Judy, think about it. Is it that you can't do it, or you just don't know how to yet? And that stuck with me forever. And so I think we have a little bit of central office saying, oh, we can't do that, where really they mean they just don't know how to yet. So if we can show them how to, and show them that this works and how it's not going to be a drain on the already taxed resources there, I think we will get buy-in. But we kind of have to, it's the military thing where you have to, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to get permission sometimes. So,
So we have 3 people that are,
oh, thank you.
2 people waiting now.
And
1 person waiting.
yes. Yes, please bring my attention to that, because I'm busy looking at all the amazing faces on the screen and not looking at the side bits there. Oh, hi, Naomi.
So I have a question for you. What are your skills that you bring to the position of leader?
I have a lot of experience leading. I'm on my 4th business that I have started and run, and I'm just kind of shutting it down right now to focus on politics, which people who've known me my whole life is like, Judy, politics, seriously? I was one of those folks who was didn't feel like I was being heard, didn't feel like I was represented, and was very discouraged with a lot of the way politics is done across Canada. So for all of those people that were trying to grow our vote, those people were me, or are me. So I know how important it is to reach out to them and how important it is to give them a voice. So it is, what was the actual question? I go off on tangents, sorry.
What are your skills that you bring to the position of leader?
So empathy, having that experience. I have experiences living in 5 different provinces across Canada, knowing what it's like to live rurally as well as in cities. I have, I had to drop out of school to support myself at 16. I was homeless at one point in time, and I've also worked in high tech making six figures. So I know the spectrum of Canadian experience, perhaps in a way that not many other people do. I have the ability to speak to people across Canada, and actually to be able to look at very complex, overwhelming amounts of data and distill it down to the commonality and the salient points, which is really, really critical when we're having to deep dive in some of the policy issues that are very complex, but the average person is not going to understand that. So that's really, really critical skill to be able to have, and also to be able to truly listen to people and not not, in coaching, we call it disengaging from the outcome. So you know that you're wanting to help your client get to their goal, but you can't want it more than they want it for themselves. You have to stay focused on the steps that are going to get you there, and not get hung up in trying for perfection, or trying to have a personal attachment to whether that success happens or not. So just like in entrepreneurial thinking and startup thinking, is that you can't be afraid to take that first step, right? You have to take that step and then start moving in the direction you want to, and keep checking in all the time with the data, and so that you know that if you have to adjust course. But that movement, that getting things started, is really, really, really critical. And we can't be so focused on perfection that we don't get started. And that's a problem I think we've had as Greens, is that we are so detail oriented, so science focused, that we try to have things perfect before we move forward.
Thank you very much. I think Brian Beaton has a question for you.
Hi, Brian.
You have to press the unmute.
Okay, I'm not seeing Brian on the list here. There's
Is he
Brian
gone?
Moore. There's not Brian Beaton.
So is he gone?
He
Okay,
might have.
so his question was, how important do you feel is the ability to communicate effectively in French?
I think that it's very important, but it is something that can be learned. I am working on my Francais. It is unfortunately something that I have tried to learn in the past, but I've never lived anywhere I could use it. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So I am working on it. There are other skills that I bring to the table that you can't necessarily learn as quickly as you can French. I think it's more important that you can learn the French, you're committed to doing so, but that you understand why the French is important. And it's not so much the language, it is the understanding that language colors the worldview of the population that speak it, whether that is a First Nations language or French. And we have Acadian French, and we have Quebecois French, and we have New Brunswick French. And those communities have a lot in common, but they also see things a little bit differently as well. And I think that is more critical than coming into this with something that can be learned as you go.
Okay, thank you very much. So Brian Beaton says he had another meeting to attend, but he sure appreciates you doing this, and thanks for hosting the gathering.
Excellent.
And Thomas Trappenberg says he has to leave. His wife's calling supper.
Oh.
Okay, so I have another question. What are your weaknesses that you bring as a leader? You already talked about willing to work on things, so
yes. One of the weaknesses is that I always strive for perfection. So I don't know if anybody follows astrology, but I kind of jokingly say I was born on the 22nd of September, which is on the cusp between Virgo and Libra. So I'm a recovering perfectionist, always striving for balance. So I do know that about myself, and that's why it's so important that I've learned how to take the steps to get in motion and not be paralyzed by inaction until we have a perfect solution. And so that's why I understand the COVID response isn't what we wanted from the government. We should definitely be doing guaranteed livable income, but I can also respect that they chose to work with the existing systems in order to get money in people's pockets as quickly as possible. And it's showing that that the guaranteed livable income will be a better solution, because they're seeing the complexities, and doesn't matter how many new directions that they're taking, they are leaving people out. So sometimes you have to kind of let people be imperfect in order to work through their process. So that would be a weakness that I do work on, and I don't speak French yet. I am working on it, and I have a fabulous translator who'll be working with me on the Francophone debates.
great. Anyone else have a question?
Oh, I got another guest coming in.
It says David Kuhn is just starting his meeting. He might, oh, this is for John Rice. He might be back.
Okay. I know it's we
Somebody
have
here, I think, is
conflict.
trying to talk, Dave Abbey, but he needs to unmute.
Just did.
There you go.
Okay, Judy, first of all, I first heard you speak in by teleconference in Regina at the
Oh, yes.
election of that lady who's down pointing here.
Ah, yes, the lovely redhead.
Anyway, more seriously, there was two things I wanted to say. First of all, I'm glad to hear you say I think that you're not perfect,
Oh, I'm not.
because the way some of the other candidates for this job are talking about, I think they are perfect.
Yeah.
There's two terms that have been floating around the last 48 or 72 hours, at least among the folks that I deal with in this party. And those two words are eco-socialist and eco-fascist.
Ah, yes, yes.
Both of which, personally, I have some concerns about labeling. What's your sense of what? And also, I should mention too that at an open part of a federal council meeting, which I was on until next week, I was asked to play Dragon from the Dragon's Den.
Oh,
and,
yes.
We had a proposal put to us, and then we were asked what was our opinion. And I stole a phrase from Kevin O'Leary, which was, "I don't care which one it does, because it's all about the votes."
Yeah.
So,
Well,
so I'm sort of in the middle between the so-called eco-fascists and eco-socialists.
well,
But I'm curious to know what you think of those terms, and how would you describe the orientation of this party?
I think you hit the nail right on the head, is that are we a political party or are we an ideology? You know, you can get caught up in being an ideology and miss the vote and not achieve the goal of electing members. I also have a serious dislike of labels, because, you know, labels and words have historically been in place so that we have a common understanding and a kind of a shortcut to understanding. But unfortunately, words like eco-socialist, eco-fascism all have a lot of negative connotations along with them now, and they're polarizing. They elicit an emotional response that often makes people defensive. So then you shut down communication. You know, you may actually agree on a whole lot of things and agree that the earth and the people have to come first, well before profits. But because you've thrown out these polarizing terms, you've shut down the conversation. I also have another issue with labels, in that I find them extremely confining, because once you have a label on you, it's nobody allows you to be anything other than that label. And I don't think any of us are a single thing. You know, I think of it in terms of, because I teach nutrition, I think of it in terms of a meal. You know, I may have a meal that would be considered vegan, but I may have another meal that's vegetarian or pescatarian or keto or what have you. But what am I in my complexity? I don't fit under any one of those umbrella, one of those labels. And so I think the party, people talk about a great big green tent, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm just going to mute somebody here because we're getting some background there. Sorry. I don't necessarily agree that with the big green tent. I think that we have to have a commitment from every single member that they agree with our core principles. We have 6 core principles for a reason, and all of our policies, all of our discussions, all of our goals and our focus needs to be compared against those principles. And if you have somebody coming in who doesn't agree with those principles, then perhaps the Green Party's not right for them. You know, we have to have that core understanding of where we're all at. And it doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. Absolutely shouldn't. It would be very boring if we all agreed on exactly the same things. You know, how could we grow if our ideas aren't challenged? You know, and we don't work together to better solutions. You know, that's one of the things I love about consensus building, is that, you know, you throw something out there with brainstorm, somebody else on it and make something even better. You know, that's awesome. You should be doing a lot more of that. But the labels, eco-socialism and anything fascism, I have issues with. I think that what we're seeing down in the States is a lot of classical fascism, where the voice of the people is being is being completely overwritten by those in power, and I think that's something we have to be very careful about. But the ecology and the environment, you know, quite frankly, if the earth isn't healthy and we can't live on it, then nothing else really matters. So the short answer is that I'm not going to buy into any one or the other of those, but I don't necessarily discard somebody for labeling themselves with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else have a question?
I've got one.
Okay, hold on a minute. I'm just going to mute everybody because I'm getting way too much background stuff here.
Guy, like, who is, trying to console him.
Okay.
Can you hear?
So just hold on. Okay, so who's speaking now, Sheila?
Paul Martin.
Paul
Paul
and
Martin.
Morton, I will make sure I unmute you. Okay.
Right in front of her eye.
Okay, go ahead, Paul. Sorry about that with all that background noise.
You're fine as long as you can hear me. I can hear you fine. Over.
Okay, awesome.
He won't ask for. He won't be in this position. Because if he are in the
Green Party, whether we're an ideological platform or a political party, where are we going? So let's just assume for a minute that we make great strides in the next election. Ideology begets becoming a political party. So how do we adapt Green Party ideology and principles into terms of foreign affairs that will command or continue to command respect on the world stage?
That's an excellent question, Paul, and I thought about that a lot because world affairs or international affairs is not my strong suit. So especially, I mean, we've had such internal strife over the boycott, diversify, well, the BDS, and in the perfect world, the perfect goal, knowing that that's not going to happen overnight, would be that if we make decisions based on morality and human rights for one country, then we must apply them to all countries that are in a same situation. And if we do not, then we are hypocritical. I mean, there's no way around that. Just because somebody's a trading partner doesn't mean they get away with human rights abuses. Like I said, this is very ideological, but I think that that's where we need to always strive for. Because if we don't, then we do lose our ideology. We do lose those principles that we hold so dear. So I would say that the party itself needs to hold itself to higher ideals. And as official opposition, we would be in a position to actually influence that moving forward. As we get more MPs in the House, we also can influence that more going forward. But it's not just about complaining about what isn't being done. We need to have real solutions that can be put on the table, well thought out by people who know this area well, and that we must choose not to play the international political game, just like we're choosing to do politics differently within Canada. Does that answer your question, Paul? Does that answer your question, Paul? Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether I don't know. He's not saying anything, is he?
No, I'm not sure.
Should we go on to the next question?
Sure.
Okay, so I read something today about in the National Post saying that workers should get back to work. The Liberal government has given them the CERB, and now they've passed a wage subsidy, and they should not go into the wage subsidy. They should go straight back to work. So what do you have to say
I think that we have to listen to the medical experts that have clearly shown to us that we have to be careful not to lift restrictions too quickly. You know, the problem, and I've said this right from the very beginning, knowing how stats work, if we do what we're told, and we you know, socially distance, and those who can stay home do stay home, and we get our rates of infection down, and we don't overload our medical systems, that we will always have people that say, oh, well, we didn't have to do that. You know, it wasn't as bad as they said, we don't have to do that. So I've been posting for a while saying that we, you know, we'll never know if what we did was too much, but history will be the judge if we don't do enough. And so moving forward, I think we have to be very careful, very judicious. I have big problems with, in Nova Scotia, they said that they're going to start opening the elementary schools in 3 weeks. 3 weeks is not enough time for the teachers to get their classrooms in a state where they can socially distance their students. They don't have enough time to change their curriculum so that they can adequately teach. That is going to be into June. You know, I remember way back in my school days and my sons, you know, mid-June, there's really no education going on. You're playing games and you're just doing, especially at the elementary level, you're not really educating. So is it wise to risk those children and their parents and families when we really don't know what we're dealing with yet? You know, we still don't know with COVID-19 whether we have lasting immunity. You know, people have antibodies, but there's a lot of research coming out showing that that may not be lasting immunity. And so that means we will not achieve herd immunity, and we may not be able to have a viable vaccine. And coronaviruses are notoriously difficult to create a vaccine for. So it's not out of the realm of reality that we may have to completely change the way we do things like school. And that I mean, you've got all these little kids running around, and this is what little kids do, is they touch each other and they touch everything, and the teacher's touching them all, and making sure zippers are done up and mitts are on and noses are wiped and all the rest of it. And that is going to be a highly dangerous situation. And there was actually a pediatrician on the news today who was saying many of the same things, that she has serious concerns. On a school bus, how are you going to physically distance children on a school bus? I think it's too soon for that, for some things. There are others that, yes, we absolutely can be looking at putting people back to work in, but we have to be really stringent with those supports to keep the physical distancing. I mean, look what's happening in the meat packing plants, you know, having lip service and video inspections is putting people's lives at risk. And it's certainly not worth it. So part of it is, you know, people want to be working, people want to be, you know, businesses need to be getting back to work. We can't be in lockdown forever, but how do we do that in a safe way? And I think there's going to be some missteps, you know, the best intentions to get things going again, but there is going to be some missteps.
Okay, thanks very much. Grant Penton has a question.
Sure, hi Grant.
You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, Grant, go ahead. Grant, do you have your question? Oh, I think Grant says that he doesn't have his mic connected. Okay, so.
Hello?
Hello, is that Grant?
Work? Okay,
Yeah.
yes, I just plugged in my USB headset. I don't have a camera. Okay, I typed it out there. I just, to make a query about your position on the members' rights to present at the BGMs. which
Mm-hmm.
I recall when I was at Vancouver in 18, I heard, I think Ken and Elizabeth say that there had been an experiment in reducing members' options to present an actionable resolutions, and that was going to be relaxed. I wondered if you had a position on that generally.
I have serious concerns about reducing members' participation in creating policy. I think that we may be expecting too much of a biannual general meeting, in that we only have a certain amount of time and we only have a certain attention span. So I'd like to explore some ways that a lot of the groundwork for these different policies and potential policies could be done as working groups leading up to that, and having a vetting process where they kind of have to get through round 1, round 2, or maybe even round 3, depending on how many policies get proposed, and that we have a way of voting on some of these, and then the ones that need more discussion could go on to the biannual general meeting. So I would like to find different ways of being able to ensure that we don't just arbitrarily place a number on how many proposals can be brought forward, because that's really limiting the voice of the membership, and I'd like to avoid that at all costs. So we have to be a little bit more creative, and it may require some changes to, you know, the way we do things and the way we allow ourselves to do things. So that's going to be, you know, a way of doing things better, but it should always be about participatory democracy. And when we do things that are in direct opposition to participatory democracy, that concerns me greatly, because that's going against one of our core principles. And there are solutions that we could be looking at to be able to be respectful of the time and the reality of a, you know, a 3-day meeting, 2-day meeting, but being aware of the important work that members are bringing forth with these policies.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and you had a second question there about yeah, the free trade agreement with Israel. I have some serious concerns with what's going on in Israel. You know, I have serious concerns about what's going on in a number of places that we trade with in the Middle East, including, you know, Saudi Arabia. And then we also have issues in Tibet with China acting in a very similar way. So if we are implementing restrictions on and choosing not to trade with one country, we need to be implementing those across the board, and not doing so on any other reason than the human rights abuses that are going on right now. I think that we need to take a hard line against human rights abuses. I think our policies support, our principles support that, and that as a Green feels like the right thing to do, and not to play politics with human rights.
Okay, I just brought that up because we have a most favored trading status with Israel, and it goes beyond just a regular trading relationship as we do with the other countries that you mentioned. So that's why it's going to come up again next year.
It absolutely will. But you know, I think that COVID-19 has really made us look at our distributed, you know, our distributed networks of trading and how they are problematic, especially for things that are critical items. So I think that there's going to be an appetite to relook at some of these trading relationships. You know, trading rules in general, I have real problems with countries being able to sue other countries for not letting them do what they want in that country, or for businesses being able to sue countries for not allowing products being sold in their countries. Like when the Trans-Pacific Partnership first came through, and it was trying to be pushed through with allowing corporations to sue a country if that country didn't want that product in their country. I had serious issues with that. So we really have to look at trade in general across the board, and be equitable in how we implement our principles and policies across the board.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I just get into just one more process question that I asked at the BGM and I didn't get a clear answer. As leader, would you commit to making statements available on the web portal, on the main GPC webpage?
Absolutely.
The thing on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think actually they've actually gotten a lot better with that in very recent days. I would say even weeks. We've had multiple statements coming out, sometimes multiple in each day. So I'm very pleased to see that happening. You know, as we get our shadow cabinet more supported and functioning better, so that these shadow cabinet members aren't just acting in isolation, and their own little groups. I'd like to see members more involved with that. We'll have the opportunity to be more responsive to when things happen within the world and be able to get those statements out much more rapidly, which I think is critical. You know, it's horrible when everybody else has had their say on a subject and then finally the Greens come up with something. You know, the downed airliner in Iran was a really good example of that, where we could have come out a little bit stronger right off the bat, rather than sounding as wishy-washy as we did.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, Sheila is muted. Go ahead, Sheila. Can you repeat? You were muted.
So Naomi has a question.
Okay. Hi, Naomi. I love your hair today. We should have worn our hats.
Oh, here. Wait. How do I? Am I muted?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, this is a question I think I've actually asked you possibly by phone. All the leadership
Okay, hold on a second. I'm having background here. Sheila, I'm going to mute you because there's stuff going on behind you that is. There we go. Okay, go ahead, Naomi.
All good. I'm the Saskatchewan Green Party leader, and this, of course, is the birthplace of the NDP.
Yes.
And so I realize that this could be without complications, but what would your position be on the federal and provincial parties being more integrated as far as memberships go in provinces where that worked? I recognize that not all provinces would want that, not all provincial Green parties would want that to happen, but here in Saskatchewan, it's actually a matter of huge confusion. They think that when they got their federal membership, they've got an automatic provincial membership. And so, what would your feeling on having some sort of arrangement of integrated membership in provinces where that worked for the members?
That's an excellent question. I think we had that confusion in Nova Scotia as well, where people aren't sure which party, or they don't even realize that, you know, when we're talking politics, we have people who don't even realize that there's a difference between federal and provincial. So I like that the provincial are totally independent from federal. And I think that organizational and that structure and that oversight is good, but I think we need more of a gentleman's agreement in order to make that easier for citizens of Canada to understand. So we may be able to do something in those regions whereby you get a complimentary membership, or there is a coordination of that where the memberships will still be separate, but when you apply for one, you do get both. That's a discussion that I think would be worth having, and because it benefits the individuals, it benefits Canadians across the board, and it benefits, you know, we're seeing how important it is to just be green, and that's independent of whether you're provincial or federal in terms of getting a green presence in communities and on the ground. And this is another way of just being green.
So you've had some experience with both your provincial wing Greens and the federal wing.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm currently for Fundy Shore in Nova Scotia. Sheila and I have been kind of sharing Fundy Shore, and I was convener last time we just had our BGM, and now I'm regional rep and she's convener. We've kind of swapped. And so yes, so I do have experience with both. And it comes down to how can we get more people just being green and being involved in the green movement and doing green things together. And if that means making it easier for them to have membership in both, I think that that's critical.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alternate.
Okay, so we have some hands raised here. Naomi was just on. Shay, did you have a question?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Shay.
So I'm sorry I was a little late to the meeting, but I'm happy to hear your thoughts. I'm from Ontario.
Excellent, welcome.
So I had a question. I know that the Green Party is very much advocates for a moratorium or a ban on single-use plastics. And I wanted to hear your thoughts as that relates to accessibility and equity for the disabled community.
Absolutely. Are you speaking specifically about straws and like the bendy straws and that sort of thing?
Specifically about straws, but there are a lot of single-use plastic things that are of concern to the disability community, and I just wanted to hear what you thought.
Well, I think that's important conversations to have, and we've been using plastics, and plastics have been cheap and readily accessible. I'd like to explore a little bit more about, if there are other alternatives that would work for that community as well, because it's critical that we're not taking something away from them that is a quality of life issue. And we have to have viable alternatives. That's across the board. We can't take plastic bags away when there's no, there's no alternative, or people can't afford an alternative. So, we have to be looking at putting subsidies towards the alternative producers of these alternative products and really pushing for that so that they can start digging into the market share. We did really good getting a plastic bag ban here in Nova Scotia finally. And now, of course, with COVID-19, they don't want anybody bringing in their reusable bags. And we're all like, ah! So we have to be flexible to the circumstances in which we find ourselves. But it's very important to have those conversations about accessibility, because we're all human beings and we look at the world from our perspective by default. And without having those conversations, we may not be aware that our decisions aren't fulsome and aren't inclusive. And so those conversations are really, really, really critical. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for your answer.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, Sheila, can you go ahead?
So my question is, what would you do for international students? I have 3 in my house that are here, but don't necessarily qualify for any money that the government is giving to students or regular people. They're waving in the background here.
we hear you. We hear you. I know our MPs, Jenica and Paul and Elizabeth, are shouting, from the rooftops in Ottawa and virtually that, we're missing people. We're missing people who really need our help, who are really stuck. Not only do they not have CERB, they don't have rent subsidies. And that trickles down to, the landlords such as Sheila. A lot of times people have just rooms in their homes that they're depending on as well. So it's really, really critical to make sure that we're not missing anybody. And of course, as Greens, we know guaranteed livable income across the board should be what's being advocated. And that's definitely where we need to go. How fast we can get there is another question. So at this point in time, we need to just keep putting pressure on. I think there's a couple online petitions in support of making sure that international students have supports. That they're in a bad situation. They aren't able to work. They are not having income. They're not getting served, and they can't go home. So what are we expecting them to do? It's completely unrealistic that they're being ignored, and we need to bring their situation to light in Ottawa and continue to put pressure on getting supports for them as well.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, we've got another chat here. Is that another question? One more point. Reflecting on Thomas's comment in the last, it was a helpful model for candidates to focus on why. Okay, so I'm going to read aloud from chat in case people aren't looking. This is from Grant. One more point, reflecting on Thomas's comments on his last tour here. Oh yes, for Thomas Toiven. He gave us a helpful model for candidates to focus on the why behind the how, behind the what of our policies. And we thought it would be great if candidate coaching would integrate that. I love that. I absolutely love that. We had the opportunity here in West Nova and in several other ridings in Nova Scotia to have Thomas come down just prior to the writ dropping and to work with us on a number of different things, including his take on listening campaigns. And I found his perspective refreshing, and you know, his commitment to excellence for the party was very commendable. And there's so many things that we could be doing to be training candidates, helping candidates understand and connect in their ridings, but we also have to be listening to the candidates as well, who know their constituents and know their demographics. And sometimes some of the feedback that I've received from other campaigns is that things are decreed from on high, and thou shalt do this in the riding if you want any help from national. And I have a real problem with that. If we're not listening to our own candidates, how are we listening to our constituents? So it's really important that we walk the talk. But yes, we have to understand, and that's really the core to it, is we need to ask questions and understand. Did you have more that you wanted to add to that, Grant? Did you want to clarify if I haven't answered that in a fulsome manner? And I'm just, oh, and there's another one from Grant as well. He's been very busy in the chat here. He says, years ago, I hosted a regional meeting in which Thomas Toiven spoke at length about the tension between party and movement, which in retrospect, I found a prelude to the reduction in the rights of party members to adequately advocate on policies at BGMs. Over the next few years, there's now pushback against that restriction. Okay, so that was a preface to asking about the BGMs. I think that, you know, Thomas, with his unique position of actually working in the national office with staff, really had an insight that many of us wouldn't ever have. It's and it behooves us to listen to people with those experiences, because they can sometimes identify issues that would not otherwise be evident to the average person, because we have that, there's a wall between what goes on with staff and what members see. And I mean, we don't necessarily need it to be a glass house. We certainly don't need, you know, 20 bosses for every staff member. That would be insane. There was another quote from the federal council candidates that were talking in those terms. But we do need to be aware of what's working and what isn't working, and to support our federal council members in organizing and structuring the governance model in a way that will support the most efficient functioning of the party. And I am confident that we have people running for council who understand that and have solutions for that moving forward. So it's I'm very heartened with the depth of knowledge of the candidates that are running in federal council. And please, everybody, make sure that you do vote in federal council. You know, I was very disheartened last time when we had such a low voter turnout. It was very disheartening, very much not a participatory democracy. And I see this year that members have taken it upon themselves to organize and make sure that people know who the federal council candidates are and the Young Greens council candidates are, and to share that information, make it possible for us to meet them and ask our questions so that we can make informed decisions when we vote. And I hope that continues with the leadership contest as well. Okay, so excellent. And Dawn asks about universal guaranteed basic income. So how would I promote this issue, and how would I describe the payment in terms of administration and how much, what current monetary payments, like ODSP, Ontario Works, or whatever each province had for income support and old age security pensions, etc., would you include? Okay, so I think that you know, I like that the Green policy is guaranteed livable income. So it's not just a basic income, but it's actually a livable income. You know, people are complaining about CERB because it's only $2,000 and their rent doesn't even cover their rent, when they don't understand that in Nova Scotia, for a person on disability who's not able to work, they make less than $800 a month. And most one-bedroom houses around here are $600. So it is very critical that whatever payments are decided on are livable, and that they are tied to the cost of living in different regions across the country. And that's not just province by province, because, you know, Northern Ontario is going to have a different cost of living than downtown Toronto. And so we have to be reflective of that. And it's one of the benefits of, from a fiscal point of view, of implementing guaranteed livable income is that we would be replacing existing safety nets that are requiring you to qualify. And so when we replace those existing social safety nets, that is where we get the money to be able to run the program, because we're eliminating duplication of effort and implementation of the program. We are, you know, eliminating that stigma that is so hard for people on you know, income assistance. And I grew up on what was called welfare at the time. My father was working in forestry as what's known as a tree topper in Nova Scotia, not Nova Scotia, British Columbia, and he was flung off the top of the tree. And he hurt his back really badly, and he was disabled for the rest of his life. And that put him on disability. It put my mom on, with 3 kids at home, it put her on welfare, and it broke our family apart, which was hard to see as a child, because, you know, my mom always said that those first 3 years that she had with my dad were the most happy she had in her entire life. And after that accident and the financial pressures that were on us, it was incredible. And so growing up in that circumstance, I have personal understanding of the shame that comes from it, the having to, and I saw it through my mother, how it was completely demoralizing and is structured in a way that doesn't encourage people to get out and take as much work as they can. You know, the current system isn't set up like that. It's actually prohibitive. It claws money back. And so why are you paying for a babysitter and then having that income clawed back on top of it all? And so you're further behind than you were when you started. So we have a lot of problems with the current systems. So when we look at implementing guaranteed livable income, this concept of having to qualify for it, I think, needs to be thrown out the door. And we need to apply it across the board with the understanding that it will be taxed back if you're over a certain income level. Because really it's at the end of the year that you know whether you had enough to live on or not. You can't look at what happened last year to determine what your income or what your supplement level should be the following year, because your circumstances could be totally different. You could have been in school last year and now you're working, or you could have been working last year and now you're in school, you know, or you're raising a baby at home, or, you know, there's so many different things that happen from year to year that you can't look at it future-based. You have to look at it, okay, what's happened, now we'll adjust. And, you know, I mean, you guys are Greens, you've all read, you know, dystopia, or pardon me, utopia for realists. You've looked at the MinCom data, you know, you know what I'm talking about. And so we really need to look at what types of, the pensions are a bit iffy, because the Canada pension people have been paying into, so that's not, It's not an entitlement. It's not something that is given that you haven't given into or haven't paid into. So that would be one that we have to look at independently. Of course, pensions that come from work or that are already set up would have to remain in place. It may come to be a time that provincial, I'm just throwing this out here, I'm not saying that this is for absolute, but there could be other pensions that would end up going away. Government pensions, because the guaranteed livable income would be taking that place going forward, or not. You know, we have to look at what's going to work, what are all the different things in all the different provinces. You know, I'm familiar with what's going on in Nova Scotia, but the different systems in Ontario and Saskatchewan and Alberta are all a little bit different. So we need to all sit down and look at, okay, what can be rolled into this guaranteed livable income, and what's at a provincial level, what's at a federal level, who's putting in how much from federal and from provincial for the guaranteed livable income. I think in the last platform, or with respect to guaranteed livable income, the estimate was it would take about 2 years of negotiating with the provinces just to come to the terms of how much would be being paid out in different regions. So there is already the understanding of how important it is to have those conversations with the provinces and have a joint rollout of this program.
And there are several people who don't belong to our party and are very active in other parties that support the idea of a guaranteed livable income.
Absolutely.
Many of you probably know that Hugh Siegel,
Yes,
who worked for Brian Mulroney, was with the Ontario project until Doug Ford got rid of it.
absolutely.
I also just happened to notice that us people in Saskatchewan, we don't mind eating and drinking during these webinars.
No, Nova Scotia too. I have my water. Oops, we can't hear you, Naomi.
Am I on video?
You are.
Oh, yes. Okay, I was eating and drinking.
That's okay. That's okay. Mm. And further to that, Dave, I actually heard that recently there are 50 of our senators who signed a statement advocating a guaranteed basic income as well, and they're across the board. They're not Greens, so I'm very pleased to see that we're getting a lot more buy-in. People are seeing it's an obvious solution to the current situation, and so we should all be talking guaranteed livable income across Canada to anybody who will listen at this point in time, because they're more receptive now than ever before.
And we shouldn't be upset necessarily if other parties also try to claim credit for it, because they all will try to claim credit for it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, we've always said that, you know, and I feel this way myself. I'm very goal-oriented. I really don't care who gets the credit. I just want the work done. But, you know, having said that, in order to bring this party where it needs to be, we have to not be afraid to beat our own drum a little bit. You know, say, well, you know, this is what we've been working on as well. You know, the NDP are not the only ones who are talking about and have good policies for, you know, the universal Medicaid and guaranteed livable income. You know, we pioneered all of this, being the first party that recognized, you know, same-sex marriages, and NDP are really quick to say, well, we did too. So we have to be a little bit better about beating our own horn and getting the word out. But we don't necessarily have to be hung up on getting credit. Oh, Sheila, you're muted again.
How do I do?
Hi, Vince.
Okay. I have a question.
Sure.
I'll play devil's advocate on guaranteed livable income.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a serious opiate addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And if you give me money, I'm going to blow it on, I'm going to spend it on hookers and blow. Okay. And you know what? Some wealthy people who are paying taxes to pay for my guaranteed livable income, they don't like that I'm spending my money on hookers and blow. So how will you deal with that? How does guaranteed livable income deal with people who have problems that
Hold on a minute here. You just got muted for some reason.
Oh, I got muted?
Yeah, everybody got muted.
We all got muted.
Hold
So
on a second here.
I'll repeat that.
Thank you.
How does the guaranteed livable income deal with problems that can't be solved by giving people more money if they have, for example, serious substance abuse problems, gambling addictions, and other reasons why they suffer poverty that don't have anything to do with money?
Well, there's a couple parts to that, Vince, and thank you, because we get that question all the time. And a couple of things are, as a human being, do we as Greens fundamentally believe that we have the right to dictate to others how they live their lives, or do we not? And I'm firmly on the I do not. I do not get to say to somebody how they live their life. Do we as Greens believe in the basic human right of being able to feed ourselves and clothe ourselves and have a roof over our heads? I say absolutely we do. And the stats back up the fact that guaranteed livable incomes and even small amounts, $500 or $600, actually reduce the amount of addictions, reduce the amount of crime. You know, it's a chicken and the egg. Sometimes you have addictions that have thrown people into poverty, but sometimes poverty creates a situation where people are looking for an escape and they fall into an addiction. So it is a chicken and an egg situation in addictions. And, you know, one way we deal with addictions, especially with opioids, is that we decriminalize them so that we can, instead of putting money into incarcerating people who have you know, it's a mental, or not a mental, but a health problem or an illness, which is what addiction is, then we can put that money into helping them beat that addiction. So that's kind of a separate but related issue. Homelessness as well is something that is related but not going to be completely eliminated with a basic guaranteed livable income, because there's many reasons people are homeless. You know, we have a lot of people with mental health issues who are homeless, as well as people who just can't afford a home. So we have to be dealing with things on multiple levels and working with the people who know best. You know, we've got non-governmental organizations, we've got nonprofits that work extensively in these communities and know what the problems are and can advise us to great degrees on how best to mitigate any side effects to that.
Okay, I agree with everything you said. Perfect. However, I rebuttal here in a way, okay? Guaranteed livable income may not be the only way to solve the poverty problem. There may be other ways to do it. And I'm an advocate. I really like my health insurance card. I got a health insurance card. It gives me no fee access to Medicare.
Yep.
Okay, so another solution, something you might want to consider, is upgrading that health card to make it a dignity card. And have it cover not just Medicare, pharmacare, dental care, hearing care, eye care, but also nutritious food, warm clothing, safe shelter, no fee public transit, no tuition post-secondary education, and internet access, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, all the things that you need, plus a little bit of pocket money every month. For a little bit of joy in life, maybe enough that if you saved all your pennies for a year, it'd be enough to be able to afford a 1-week all-inclusive vacation at a Cuban resort. That's if you saved every penny.
We go for that.
You know what? We live in a cold country with cold, dark, depressing winters, and I consider a 1-week trip to Cuba as a mental health to help solve mental health problems associated with seasonal affective disorder.
Okay, Vince. How are you going to get there without flying, Vince?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
We have to have a luxury plane
it'll
at
be
that point.
hold on, the Hyperloop that goes underground right to Cuba. Yes.
But you did bring up a really good point there, Vince, is that the guaranteed livable income, some people who are on social assistance are worried about guaranteed livable income, especially if they have high medication costs, because on social assistance, they only do a copay. They don't have to pay the full amount. And so it would be really critical to have a pharmacare that is implemented at the same time or previous to that, or we're going to run into problems just like that.
Yeah, and eye care, glasses.
Yep, exactly.
If a person's a truck driver and they can't afford a pair of glasses, they're not going to be a very productive or safe truck driver.
No, exactly. And I have no problems with a card, but if you start talking about a chip under the skin, you lost me. Okay.
No, I'm not talking about that. You know what? I really like the way of how the universal Medicare system works.
Yep.
You know, and to me, I'm thinking, you know, I understand, like, what I never thought of a guaranteed livable income until I joined the Green Party and I read about the policy.
Yep.
And I really liked it. But I actually do have a relative who had a serious opiate addiction. Okay. And they borrowed money from all of their relatives to pay the rent.
Yeah.
They never paid the rent. They ended up homeless. And we gave, and not only they hit all of their family and friends up for rent.
Yeah.
And they got tens of thousands of dollars and still ended up homeless.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that a guaranteed livable income, giving people, what I want to do is I want to replace poverty with dignity.
Yes.
But I also at the same time, I want to be able to be ready to defend against people that will point to the one person who abuses their money as an example of why, you know, the 999 single mothers with kids aren't entitled to it. Because I know that's exactly what's going to happen with wealthy people. Don't want to pay it because they're going, I don't see a benefit from that, me personally, and I don't care about anybody else. I'm totally narcissistic, right? So, and let's face it, that is a certain element of our society. And you, as a politician, you know exactly which example. They're not going to point to the single mother and say, see, it doesn't work.
No,
they're going to point to the person who,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I'm just throwing an idea out there.
No, it's good. It's good.
You know, I would take a guaranteed livable income over nothing.
Yeah.
But consider the other option as well.
Well, and you know, there's a lot that has to go into this discussion. So we bring something to the table, the other parties bring something to the table. You know, things like poverty, I think really should be nonpartisan. There should be nonpartisan discussions in Parliament about eliminating poverty. You know, that isn't a partisan issue. It is something about basic human dignity, and we're a wealthy enough country in Canada that this should not be an issue. But addictions definitely factor in there. The complexities of why people are homeless also factor in. And, you know, like everything, it's not a simplistic silver bullet. We have to look at a multi-pronged approach and be smart enough to realize that it isn't going to be a single catch-all, but there will have to be an education component to it. You know, we have a really awesome author in Nova Scotia who wrote a book called the Victorian Poorhouses of Nova Scotia. And it was really fascinating for me because it really helped me understand where that mindset of blaming the poor for their being poor came from. And I run into people every day who still think that, you know, you should be able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and they don't recognize that you can't do that if you don't have boots.
Yeah, exactly. Good. That's a good line. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
Yeah, you can. So we have to be
Could I ask
looking
a
at
question, a senior question?
Sure.
Could I ask a senior question? Well, I think I'm becoming, you know, well, of course I've always known because I'm a nurse, but anyway, and a social worker too, but our issues with nursing homes have not changed over the years. I've been a medical nurse, so I've looked after senior people, and we're seeing this with the epidemic, that the nursing homes are not equipped. The money has not come down from the federal to the provincial, I guess, so that they can keep the nursing homes in Nova Scotia in good shape. We'll just be talking about that. But that's an issue right across Canada.
It is, and I think
epidemics, we're going to continue to have this problem in the nursing home with homes with the elderly and frail. So where do you see the money coming from, and how is that going to get created so we can change this?
Yeah, that's a great question.
When I ran for the Green Party and with the health minister the last time, and I said, I'd like to see you do something about the nursing homes, because I said I'm going to need one soon, and that was my plea at that time, and I still am saying it.
Absolutely. And with the situation with COVID-19, it's brought all the problems to light that people have been complaining about and talking about for years. You know, the for-profit model for nursing homes, I think, has really shown itself to be broken. I'm not a fan of a huge government or government running businesses. But, you know, we need to be looking after our seniors. We need to be making sure that we have trained staff in these circumstances. You know, that's part of the problem that we have in Nova Scotia, is that we still have so many people. Most people don't even have a family doctor. And so nursing homes are understaffed. They don't have the staff isn't trained as well. They don't have, you know, the personal protective equipment. They don't have the resources they need to care for people. We're warehousing our seniors. We're not caring for our seniors in a lot of these homes. And that has to stop. That needs to be a priority. You know, some things in government are a responsibility of the government. It's not oh, it would be nice if this happens, if we can find the money. We have to make certain things priorities. And caring for our people need to be our top priority. In business, I was always told, you know, if you look after your employees, they look after your customers, and your business will thrive. The same is true of our country. If we look after our people, who are our biggest and best resources in Canada, if we look after our people will look after Canada. You know, if we have people who are highly educated, who are well-fed, who are healthy, who are encouraged to be involved in medicine or you know, high tech or what have you, whatever that brings joy to them and will only benefit the country. And yet that's not the way historically our governments have looked at it. I really do see our government as being responsible for the people, not the corporations. Our governments are responsible for making sure that we walk lightly on this land and you know, treat our earth with the respect that it deserves and that we require if we want to continue living on it. And we need to be looking after our people much better than we are. It's this disparity in income is causing tremendous issues within our society and across especially the Western countries. And we need to be looking at ways. I mean, in the last election, we talked about making sure that the most wealthy are paying taxes, that we put taxes on those electronic funds transfers at the high level, where they're doing multiple transactions every second, and the commodities trading and that sort of thing. We really do need to be doing that, making sure that Amazon, Netflix, you know, all of those electronic companies that are making money in our borders, that they pay taxes, because the taxes cannot be, I mean, we need taxes in order to run the government. I mean, that's just the reality. And if we're not getting taxes from those who can afford it, then we're trying to get taxes from those who can't, and we're making the situation even worse.
I got a short way to say that.
Sure.
If you make money in Canada, you pay taxes in
Exactly,
Canada.
exactly. And I have a serious issue with the companies that are asking for bailouts now, and yet some of them are registered offshore, or they have their holdings offshore and aren't paying taxes. I'm sorry, if you don't pay into the taxes, you don't get to collect on the other end of it. Yeah.
Can I butt in?
Sure.
Colin Griffiths.
Hi, Colin.
I'd give you a picture if my camera was working.
Okay. We'll have to imagine.
I had a question following on to what Vince was asking, but it's a rhetorical question. Technically, in the Green Party, it's the grassroots and the biennial general meetings that set policy.
Yes.
The leader does not have a clear mandate to define policy.
Absolutely.
If anything, there is an interpretation role, I think. I guess my question is, how would you operate within that mode? I mean, you're not going to be able to go out and say, I think this should be done.
No, absolutely not.
How would you operate within that mode? And particularly, I think it's critical whoever becomes the next leader is effectively a co-leader.
Yes.
We've got one leader in the House, another leader currently outside of the House. So can you talk about how you would work within that arrangement?
Absolutely. So there's two parts to that question. One is about the leader being a spokesperson for the party and a cheerleader, and to inspire people, and to be a cohesive energy that pulls people together towards a common goal. And that's really, really critical. And in some ways that ties right into your second question about co-leadership, because we are going to have a type of co-leadership. And I actually like that we have, our parliamentary leader as well as the leader of the party, because the focus and the skill set is a little bit different for both those types of things. And so if you've got somebody who's working full-time as an MP who has access to the people and the knowledge necessary to be a parliamentary leader, that's going to be a full-time plus job on its own. And to be expecting that person to then be going out and traveling and meeting the EDAs across the country and building capacity in those EDAs and inspiring them is a little bit to ask, a little bit much to be asking, and that they are kind of separate but similar skill sets that are required for that as well. So I think that, there is a place for co-leaders, and it's interesting, it ties right back into about policy, because I'm actually working just like any Green Party member can with groups that are working on two separate policies. One of them is a policy on co-leadership. So I'm really excited to be working with some amazing, great ideas for that policy, because I think we need to be looking at that, and for this AGM we need to have it written in a way that it's not specific for this leadership, but that can be adapted moving forward in whatever aspect the group decides, because there's multiple different permutations as to what this might look like. And all of them need to be explored, because there's some exciting possibilities with that. And I love the idea of co-leaders being not necessarily a he, she, or one gender or the other, but just not the same. If you have one co-leader that ticks these boxes, the other one can't tick the same boxes. And that gives us some more flexibility in terms of our diversity and inclusiveness within the party. And we need to be always aware of that and trying to improve on that all the time, but not necessarily thinking in terms of binary.
What would happen when presumably you get elected then? What would change once that had happened?
Well, and that's a really good question, because we have to fit it into the Elections Canada and the parliamentary structure we have, which only has a place for one leader of the party. And we may end up having to structure it like instead of having two deputy leaders, we have a co-leader, a parliamentary leader, and a deputy leader, and so that it fits within the existing framework until we can work to change it in Parliament.
I got a follow-up question to Colin's question, related. Sure. So under the Canada Elections Act, the leader of the party is the one who has to sign off on the nomination paper so that the candidate can run in there.
Right. And
that's how other political parties like the Trudeau Liberals, how they're able to overrule their EDAs and run star candidates in there. So which one of the co-leaders would be able to override the EDA and run their own star candidates in there?
I'm not sure that we should be allowing that. Yeah, I'm not sure that we should be allowing that. I have a personal experience in my limited experience with the party, but that's one of the reasons that, I was ready to start organizing and doing stuff back in February. And we were kind of delayed and until we had to actually start booking our AG or our nomination meetings in order to kind of force them to say, yeah, okay, we'll go ahead and approve you, because they kept waiting for a star candidate. They were trying to convince, there was a couple of people, so the story goes, that they were trying to convince to run in this area. I, number one, have a real problem that, you know, if we're having to convince somebody to run, that should be a big red flag, especially if you have somebody on the ground who's ready to go and is showing leadership in that area. So that's my personal experience with that. And I have to admit, it left a bad taste in my mouth. It really did. And
not just Nova Scotia.
This was Nova Scotia.
It happened in Toronto, and it also happened in Northern Ontario as well.
Yeah. Exactly. So, you know, if they have star candidates they want to run, absolutely put their name forth and let the EDA decide. You know, the EDA gets to vote and decide, and contested nominations are wonderful for the party. You know, we should have them in every ED, like a electoral district. But I do have a problem with people being kind of, I have this vision in my head of like a fairy godmother with a magic wand knocking somebody on the shoulder. But that's not how we want candidates. We want to be growing our candidates from within our EDAs and within the party, and growing that leadership and empowering people, and really building those teams moving forward. Yeah.
So I got a suggestion here. I really liked your answer. I agree with you 100%. Regarding the star candidates, if you end up leader and you got a bunch of star candidates you want to run, make that known to all the EDAs across Canada, because some of them are having hard times finding candidates.
Wonderful idea.
And they would probably love to have your star candidate.
Excellent idea. Absolutely excellent idea. Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, I have an issue too with, you know, the most winnable ridings, because by putting all of our eggs in one basket, or 2 or 3 or 4, we are ignoring the benefits of raising the green profile across Canada in all the electoral. You know, we need to be being green everywhere. Like, we need to be so green that people can't turn around without seeing green things happening. And I'm not talking about the media picking up. I'm talking about on social media. I'm talking about people in our ridings being so excited they can't tell everybody, you know, we're doing this and it's going to be exciting and fun, and come on, we're doing a dragon race, you know, and we're supporting, you know, another group, you know, I don't know, Big Sisters or Little Sisters or whatever, and we're raising money for them, but we're doing it as Greens, and we're going to have a dragon boat race. Come and join us, and we're going to have fun as a community, being green, raising the green profile, that our communities are important to us, and we're active in our communities, and we are more than politics. We're about the people, and we're about the planet.
I'm from a part of the world where we do sometimes have trouble finding candidates. And I don't think I think there was, of the 14 ridings in this province, only one was there a contest for the nomination. And the person who lost was to announce she was going to run as an independent Green. If presumably if you win the leadership, you will achieve the role of being, quote, a star candidate. If you should happen to win in Charlottetown or wherever, because who knows if Charlottetown's even going to take place now, do you anticipate running in a by-election, or would you want to wait till the next general election?
I think that is a discussion that I think we need to have as a party. I don't have as much experience in politics and strategy to be able to off the top say this is what we have to do. My heart says I would love to be able to run in my riding here, and we made good inroads, but we're certainly not up in the 20% range, but we're at 12.69. They upped it from 12.67, so 12.69%. I think that we could make good inroads here, but I'm not convinced 100% that we could elect here. It's always been a swing riding back and forth between Liberals and Conservatives. So that would be a strategy discussion that I would be relying on the experience of, you know, our federal council and other Greens across Canada to really advise us on that as to what the best approach would be, and it would have to be with the blessing of that EDA, and because it would be no different than coming in as a star candidate, and we don't want to be doing that. We would have to be respectful of that circumstance. You know, sometimes we have candidates that run 2, 3, and 4 times, and each time building on what they've done before. You know, they've done a tremendous amount of work there. It's kind of disingenuous to have somebody pop in and jump in and ride in on all the hard work that they've done. So that would have to be a conversation that would have to be had.
Who's your MP? Who is your MP?
Chris D'Entremont. We're the only we're the only riding in Nova Scotia that went Conservative. Don't anybody talk about splitting votes.
No, it wasn't that.
Yeah.
It's just that when Elizabeth May ran against Peter MacKay, I thought that was a tactical error.
Yeah, and he's, you know, well, you know that he's running for leadership of the Conservative right now. Yeah, that was a big one to go after. Our riding was, the previous Liberal had stepped down, so it was open. There wasn't an incumbent in the last election. The Liberal candidate that ran had been his assistant, and so had lots of experience in that respect. But Chris had been an MLA in one of the provincial ridings that's within West Nova, so he had a lot of name recognition and a lot of respect, and so he took that riding last time.
Good answer. By the way, I'm not against all Conservatives. I judge people by their actions and words and deeds, not their political party. Because there actually is even one Conservative who's an environmentalist.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah. One.
It's actually there were when the idea of adding gender identity and gender expression into human rights code came up. There was a Conservative MLA who did an 11th hour rally of several others in order to make sure that we did in fact, I'm a non-binary individual, we did in fact get our own place in human rights legislation. So not all Conservatives are bad.
No, there isn't. You know, it's funny. I love going into the schools, and we won the school vote in West Nova by a resounding amount, actually. So we have hope in 4 years. When some of these kids get to vote. But one of the young fellows had asked me, and bless his heart, in Yarmouth, he said, "What's the first thing you're going to do when you get to Ottawa?" And it took me back a little bit, and I had to think about it. And I said, "Well, you know, the first thing I'm going to do is start making friends, because you know you can't get things done if you're not talking to people. So you have to make friends first." And I think that is exactly what you're talking about, is that you have to find that common ground and the things that you agree on across party lines in order to get the important work done.
Good. Judy, how close are you to filing your nomination papers?
I am a couple young Greens away, and a fair bit of money, where the money is being a real problem here. You know, West Nova is rural, and we are riding that is half the population's at or below the poverty line. So they've been really hit hard with all of the closures, and a lot of people out of work. So that's a challenge. I am very uncomfortable asking people for money when I know that they don't have it and they don't know where they're going to have rent the next month. So we are, my team is actually coming together in an amazing way. We just relaunched the website, judyngreen.ca, and we will be doing a whole series of talks like this all across Canada. And we are making some phone calls and reaching out to another group of people, hoping to collect those Bernie Sanders style, $25 at a time. I just kind of envision them going around with a pledge sheet for my kids' soccer team.
No, I'm impressed. I like this format of a round table discussion amongst people. I think it's a very good one.
Yeah.
What's your view of the requirement for another 150 signatures?
I like the idea that it needs to be from, you know, all regions of Canada, but 100 are from all regions of Canada. So I'm not convinced that we need to do that all over again. You know, you can do those signatures online. if it had been not in the time of COVID-19, it wouldn't have been as much of an issue, but we're not able to travel and talk to people in each province. We're doing it this way and hoping that people will you know, put their online nominations, and I do appreciate that they're allowing us to do that now. That's simplified things greatly, but you're still needing to reach out and talk to people, which is what we need to do.
You don't want to take a constitutional issue with it, in that the Constitution says 100 signatures, period.
Yeah, it does, and you know, that's another symptom of what's wrong within the party right now, is that, you know, we're not walking the talk. We have a group of individuals who are choosing to, for whatever reason, kind of skirt the rules or make them up as they go along, and you know, that's hurting the party, and we do need to stop doing that. My position has been that as I'm running as a candidate, I have a stake in the game, and so my objecting to it can be seen as being self-serving. Yeah. And so I didn't have a say in the committee that is running the leadership contest. I didn't have a say previously, and I really think that was a misstep on the part of the party. It really should have been discussions amongst the members as to what they wanted for this leadership contest. And because of that, we are kind of stuck with what we've got right now as candidates. And it's either meet these targets or drop out. And that's basically what we've been told. You meet the targets or you drop out. And as a grassroots party, and as somebody who, you know, we're talking about diversity, well, you know, economic situation diversity also factors in there. And I definitely fall into that category, as well as being female. And there is, yeah, you know, we're either a grassroots party or we're not. And some of the decisions that were made with the leadership contest are yet again symptoms of further problems within the party.
Yep.
So let's see.
To his credit, one of your opponents, when he was in Regina in the end of February, brought nomination forms for, I think, 4 leadership candidates, and yes. I remember signing 3 of them, including one for you.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, David Murner was fabulous with that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many you have, or whether you have enough or not yet. I guess the other thing is the reason why you'll be if you win, you'll be a star candidate, because you're the same last name as the party.
I know. Actually, my team has convinced me that I can play that up a little bit. So on my website, it's about growing the party from the roots up. And that I'm green. Good. My name is Green, and I am too. So yeah. But that's as far as I'll let them get with the kitschy part of it. It'll be easy name recognition going forward. I was giving a talk for Extinction Rebellion, the Heading Towards Extinction talk, about a year ago in Yarmouth, and I had somebody come up to me and ask me if Green was a stage name, and it kind of shocked me a little bit, and all I could think of was saying, well, you know, after 37 years of marriage, I think I've earned the name. Okay, and Dawn had asked about the leadership entry fee. We have talked to, even before they announced the candidates who had announced that they were going to be running, reached out to the leadership committee and gave their recommendation that the fee be low, because we'd heard rumors that it was going to be high, and we were pretty much ignored. They didn't even respond to us at that time. We have recently done a joint statement with 5 out of the 6 of us, and we had a meeting with Joanne out of that one, so they at least responded to us. Nothing was decided at that time, but she said that they are listening. So I know that during the Federal Council meeting on Sunday, they did talk about that, but it was in camera, so we have no idea what the resolution was. And they're being careful because they do have 3 candidates that are through the first step, so they're not going to reduce that, and I respect that. You know, people have made that that hurdle. The rest of us need to reach that hurdle. There is indications that they may be flexible on the second portion, either in terms of the time or dates or the amount, but we haven't heard anything definitive.
And that's the biggest problem. It's why I'm leaving the council. Is so much is in camera.
Yeah.
So much is in camera.
No, and that must be frustrating for you, because you can't even talk about what goes on.
Is.
Yeah.
I even tried to get the agenda changed to take everything out of camera, but that was not supported.
I saw that. The vote was closer than
without breaking. Without breaking confidences, I think the leadership rules are there's some sympathy with the presentation by the 5 people that you said met with Joanne.
Yes, yeah.
I actually thought the report out of the in-council part would be publicized, but I haven't seen it publicized anywhere yet.
No, and they may, but yeah.
Yeah.
Dave, I appreciate that. Because it's kind of frustrating from our perspective. I mean, just as anybody, you're speaking out, and but you don't feel heard, and you know, we need to work on that at all levels in the party.
Are they considering the fact that this is a special time when people are definitely dealing with their finances?
I think that is factoring in, Madeline.
Factoring that in. Yeah. Well, hopefully.
Yeah, it's certainly, you know, my family teases me. They say, you know, I never do anything easy, and running as a leadership of a political party is not easy in the best of times, never mind in the middle of a pandemic. And then we have the largest mass shooting in Canada, in Nova Scotia. So I'm like, okay, what else is getting thrown at us here? How dare I ask?
Yeah, well.
Yeah, it's been interesting times.
Okay, Judy, here's another one.
You like challenges, Judy?
Here's another one. What's your view of the requirement of a leader to be francophone, or to not to be francophone, but to speak French?
Well, actually, right now it's not a requirement. It's not written in anywhere. I think that the ability to learn French and the commitment to do so is critical, and I am doing that. My challenge has been that I have tried to learn French 3 different times, and then I've always lived places I couldn't use it. So I've lost it. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so this time I'm looking for people to be able to practice French with. And I have a translator who worked with me on the campaign, because we had 6 debates on the last general election. The first was in French and the last was in French. And he worked with me to be able to do opening statements en français and not completely embarrass myself with the pronunciation. And then he did simultaneous translation for me through the events. And that's what we're going to be doing during the French forum that Vince is organizing. There's an English one and a French one coming up. He put the information in the chat, so take a look there. And I think that it's important. I think that as the leader or a party leader of a bilingual country, you should be able to speak both languages. And I may have made that commitment that will happen.
Okay. Est-ce que vous allez présenter des webinaires en français?
I will be doing the introductions en français. But I'm not good enough yet to have conversation back and forth. My brain is not switching.
Neither is mine.
For structure, but I'm actually understanding a whole lot more French than I had been even a few months ago. So
good.
So good. Somewhere it's percolating in here and it's working. So I'm taking that as a positive step.
Okay.
So Larry has joined us. Larry, do you have any question for Judy?
That's what I told my sister, because my sister saw, she's like, yeah, they're applying to do law, and they're having 3 professional degrees over there.
Hi, Larry, did you welcome? Thank you for joining us, Larry. Can you?
Yeah, professional degree, that's only guaranteed by the Acadia does not. No, Acadia does not have that. So I'm not talking about TAL. I'm not talking about Acadia. Acadia only has minor in legal studies. They don't even have law as a subject. Only DGM has it. It came. Not only that.
Okay, we're hearing background from your mic there, Sheila, but I'm not hearing from anyone else.
5-star, but it should be a very good university.
Larry answered in the chat.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. No questions right now. Oh, no problem. Yeah, I know we kind of conflicted with another important webinar tonight, unbeknownst to us. There's so much going on with the party right now. You know, that's a good thing that we're actually overlapping. We're getting the town halls with our sitting MPs, and we're getting, you know, the Earth Day events, and we're getting federal council events, and also from our elected provincial members as well, which is wonderful.
I'm a single parent, and it's quite a bit easier to participate in these sort of meetings and roundtables and things like that when I'm able to do it without having to figure out what childcare looks like.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Around my parenting schedule.
Yeah, you know, that's one of the unexpected side effects that we identified early on when we decided to take the campaign virtual, was that we'd actually have the opportunity to potentially get in front of more people, because, you know, I was on a Zoom call last night with our Digby Area Community Health Board. I'm a board member with them, and one of our members kind of took her laptop with her through the house as she gave her son a bath and got him ready for bed. And it worked. You know, she was still being able to participate in the meeting and still take care of everything that she needed to do for her son. And, you know, we need to be a little more flexible about stuff like that. And the virtual calls allow us to do that. We don't always have to be traveling and congregating in a certain area. Like West Nova is very, very large. We have, from one end of the riding to the other, it's about 4 hours of driving. And so we end up doing in person, we have to do 3 different events duplicate in order to be able to get to people who will only drive a certain distance. So when we do the online events, everybody can come. You know, I think we only have 2 members who don't have internet connections. And in times of non-COVID-19, and we're not so physically distancing, they can go to another member who is close to them and join us from there.
Well, sorry. My daughter attended Mike Schreiner's campaign launch. But she was smaller then. I was able to sort of carry her around, and now she's 2.5, and she's just this absolute ball of chaos. It's adorable, but she's totally a ball of chaos. And so it's much easier not having to chase her.
Absolutely, I can relate.
Although I'm a little bit sad that I haven't. When I was pregnant, I promised Elizabeth that she would get to meet Lilith one day. So I'm hoping that does still get to happen at some point.
Absolutely, I'm sure it will. Sorry, Cindy decided that Daddy shouldn't move, and he has to sit in his chair while Mommy's on here and not move. So I apologize. She's a little rescue. She's the baby in the house now. Our son is actually 36 years old, and we have 3 grandchildren, the youngest being just a year and the oldest turning 13 this year. Awesome. So yeah, Don had asked Vince if he was running for leader. You've had that question asked of you a couple of times, Vince.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate the sentiment, but no, I'm interested in getting. I'm interested in helping the Green Party succeed. And so right now it's a leadership race. Okay, and I feel my role, the role I'm going to try to play, is to try to make it. Right now, there seems to be a problem with communication between leader candidates and GPC members.
Yeah.
It would seem that there are more obstacles to communication than what there are ways. So, and it's not a huge issue to solve. So that's what we're focusing on right now, is making it so that it's easy for GPC members to communicate with the candidates and vice versa. As well, I see leadership races as an opportunity to bring new people into the party. All right, and so I think the more publicity the leader candidates have, the better it is for the Green Party in general. And the more people who run with a variety of ideas, the more people we're going to attract.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It seems that the direction we're going right now is to basically keep the leadership race a secret. There's a leadership race going on, but don't tell anybody. We don't want anybody to be aware of it, sort of thing. And I find, so I'm doing what I can to try to fix that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to get about over the 2 days, I'm shooting for about 500 people to come through.
Excellent.
In a speed dating format.
Yeah, I think that is going to be a very interesting format. I was reading that and I'm going, okay, cool. No, I like that. You know, there's a couple other challenges as you're talking about, you know, for a party that is one of the pillars is participatory democracy. We have done a very poor job of communicating to our members about federal council. We've done a very poor job about communicating to our members about the leadership candidates. And in fact, the early instructions to EDAs was that basically they couldn't organize anything. Now we've had a webinar to clarify that, and EDAs can support events like this that are organized by any official or just declared leadership candidates, as long as no money is transferred from EDAs to that candidate, and that they offer the same services or opportunities to every other candidate, whether they are official or just declared. Now, certain EDAs have made the decision that they will only do events with official candidates, which is making it even more challenging to be able to get in front of people and to inspire people to perhaps, you know, fire $25 here or there towards all of the candidates, when we should all be at this stage having the opportunity to get in front of Greens. Because as you know, we have no access to membership lists. The EDAs can send out notifications through GVote, but they are under no circumstances to give candidates any membership lists. I totally support that. There should be no giving of those names. That needs to stay private. But those EDAs can be getting that information to their members, but they're also not allowed to use the Kijiji page, which is not Kijiji, sorry, the Wikipedia page on the Green Party leadership, which is the only place that has lists of who is a declared candidate, because they will only post it there if you have an article of an event where you publicly announced your candidacy. But the Green Party is only showcasing the candidates that have already paid their $10,000 and gone through the vetting process. And if the EDAs are sending out messages to their members with that Wikipedia link or any information about non-official candidates, they'll remove it before it gets sent.
So I got a question about there was a federal council meeting Sunday night, I understand. And my understanding is that the leader contest was discussed there.
Yes. It was in camera.
Were there any decisions or changes made as a result of that meeting?
No, it was in camera. Dave, Abby just spoke about that, what had been discussed there, and that there should be something coming out being announced to the membership. So Dave just talked about that, and he's not on the call now, so to clarify. Yeah, it was taken in camera. There had been a vote on whether to take it out of camera, and that vote failed by, I think, a vote of 2. I think it went 6 to 8.
Do we know who voted to keep it in camera versus
I didn't write the names down. I didn't write.
No. I'm just saying. No.
The
They're going to
usual, the
release
usual
that.
actors. Let's just put it that way.
Because as far as I'm concerned, if you vote to put it in camera, okay, there could be a reason for that. But I think as a GPC member, I have a right to know who decided to take that in camera.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I worked really hard to add people into GVote. Okay, and the federal council, as individuals, they only put a certain number of people in GVote. Most of the people that got into GVote got there from the frontline people knocking on doors.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
absolutely.
The question I have is, like, so, I would question who owns that data? I mean, if frontline people collected the data, how is it that only a small group of people at the top have control of that data? And when we're grassroots democracy at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that once that data comes into GVote, then it is the responsibility of the National Party. And it is important that they respect that with all of the privacy laws that we have in place in Canada. It's important that they respect that. But I think that some decisions are made for other reasons.
Sure, and that's fine, and I know where that's going. But here's the thing: as soon as you have got your vetting process done, then at that point, that tells me that you're trustworthy. Okay, you made it through a vetting process. Yep. I don't know, but anyway, so at that point, as soon as you made it through the vetting process, as far as I'm concerned, you should have access to every email address and phone number and address in the entire GVote system.
Yeah, but that's not the way it'll happen. I totally respect not having access to that information before you're vetted. I agree with you 100%, Vince. The problem I have is that you pay the $1,000, you're vetted, and then within 9 days within 10 days you have to have the remaining $9,000. So basically, you have to raise $10,000 before you go through vetting, because you're not going to raise, $9,000 in 9 days. So that's why there's the delay. I agree that yes, the vetting needs to be done before you have access. And then what's happening is that we don't get email addresses. We only get phone numbers, which means then we need to have a lot of volunteers who are prepared to call, because you now don't have time to be calling every single member on the phone as the candidate. And those candidates
get email addresses?
No email addresses, no, only the phone numbers. So there's no ability to email. It's like one barrier after another to participatory democracy.
And there's 20,000 members or so you get 20,000 phone numbers?
That's right. So you either have to have a bank of volunteers ready to call, or you need to be able to have enough money to hire a call center to make
auto dialer.
Yeah, exactly. Which none of which I'm comfortable with. Yeah.
So what happens if you don't make it through the vetting process? Do you get your $10,000 back?
No, actually, we have absolutely no access to any donated funds. People will be donating through the National Party as in order to get tax receipts, and we have no access to any of that money until we are vetted and have paid that first $10,000 and then have paid the $30,000. So once we've paid the $10,000, then they'll start doing transfers into our campaign account, but there's no access to any funds that we raise until after that first $10,000 is paid.
So how do we know?
Unless people want to donate to us with no tax receipt.
Right. So how do we know
Judy,
that
I thought if the party raised 10,000 in that way, that could be applied against your nomination deposit.
Yes, it is. That 10,000, it is that nomination deposit. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not a deposit. It's non-refundable.
Understood.
Yes. Yes.
So it's the idea that the 10,000 is to prove that you can raise funds for the party. Is that what that is, do you think?
Well, there's a couple of things going on. My understanding from further clarifications that were forthcoming from federal council was that the decision was made that because we're in a minority parliament, that we could be going back to the polls very quickly, and they did not want to deplete the coffers of the party, which I totally understand that rationale. And so their goal was that the leadership contest would be completely self-sustainable in terms of the monies raised. So I think that's where the numbers came from. They looked at what the cost was going to be to fly candidates to the central location, to have the publicized and broadcast events, to do the vetting process, to to have the BGM in PEI. And so that was where their numbers were coming from, to come up with what the requirements were. They wanted us to pay for all of that process. And from a logical, fiscal, responsible point of view, that makes sense. But they didn't plan on a pandemic and people being out of work and not knowing if they're going to be able to pay the rent. So, they've had a downturn in national donations, and they didn't stop donating or raising money, fundraising nationally. So they're competing with the leadership candidates for donations on top of it all. So it's just kind of an odd situation. So I understand the rationale at the beginning as to why they would want to do that. And now it's very unlikely that we will be having a general election within the next year or so because of the pandemic. That would be very destabilizing for the entire country, not in the best interests of Canada. So, I think there needs to be some adjustments made. But so right now they did lower it. Originally it was $5,000 in total, $10,000 in the first wave, and then $40,000 by July. And they did lower that second portion to $30,000. So it's a total of $40,000 needing to be raised right now. And we're still working on the $10,000. We have 3 candidates that have made it through. Elections Canada rules say that individual candidates can use up to $25,000 of their own money. That's not an option for me. It may be for other candidates, but there's also been no indication that any of the other candidates have put their own money in. So to be fair and honest, yes. And I found it very frustrating when that amount was thrown out, because then I found my focus changed from what it should be, which is raising interest in the party and excitement about the leadership race and going out and meeting Greens and talking to, oh my God, now we have to raise money. We have to raise a lot of money, and that needs to be the focus now. And so what should be the primary focus of the leadership race is now secondary to money, to the raising of the money, which is unfortunate. It's an unfortunate side effect of that being so high. And all of the candidates feel the same way. We've had these discussions.
Okay.
Any other questions? This is awesome. I've been enjoying chatting. Sorry, Vince?
I'll ask one on foreign policy.
Sure. On my weakness, go for it.
Okay, so Canada has a contract with Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
We sell them light armored vehicles made in London, Ontario.
Yep.
Allegations have been made that some of those light armored vehicles have been used to commit war crimes against civilians.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the Saudi government is $1.5 billion in arrears.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, Canadian tax dollars are subsidizing war crimes in another part of the world.
Exactly.
What's your feeling on that?
I think that our foreign policy needs to be based on our core principles. And any country that is engaged in human rights abuses, we should be looking very seriously at our relationship with those countries. I mean, even from a fiscal point of view, why are we sending over more product when they haven't paid for what's already gone over? And that's even separate from the moral and the human rights side of things. So in general, I mean, that this is similar to the conversation about Israel, in that we either have equitable human rights is a priority in our policies and our international policy across the board and not cherry picked, or it's not. because it's really important that we're not hypocritical. I have a real problem with hypocrisy, and I don't have a problem when people who are climate change deniers are giving us a green because we're flying on airplanes to get to Ottawa, because when we're trying to change the system, we have to work within the one we currently have. And so, you know, that's understandable. However, when we are knowingly supporting activities in these countries that are known to be abusing human rights, that's hypocrisy. And as Greens, we really need to strengthen our, and this may be completely naive, but I believe that we need to strengthen our policies. And we're either in support of human rights or we're not. And it has to be applied equitably.
I agree with everything you said, but I'll suggest something else there. We're not the only country that's got this problem with Saudi Arabia. Germany has a contract to sell them tanks, and they're doing the same thing to Germany. There's Danish are making machine guns, and the Swedes are making aircraft.
Yeah.
What I would suggest is, why don't we talk to Germany, Sweden, and Denmark and say, tell you what, we'll trade you our light armored vehicles for some of your tanks. Denmark for some of your machine guns.
Oh, there you
And
go.
Sweden for some of your airplanes, and get and screw Saudi Arabia. And we keep our factories running. And you know what? We're paying for them anyway because we're out of pocket. And we end up with German tanks, Swedish planes, and Danish machine guns. And Saudi Arabia, well, good luck, Saudi Arabia. You're kind of, you know what? Come back to us when Amnesty International gives you their blessing as you are a wonderful country.
Exactly. I love that, and we need to have that more of that creative kind of thinking. You know, just because, like in the military, you get to a new posting and you'd ask why something was being done, and they'd say, well, because that's the way we've always done it, and it wasn't necessarily the best way to do it. So sometimes we do things over and over again because that's the way it's always been done, and we don't stop and think that there's a better way. So I always love it when people come up with ideas like you just did, Vince, where, you know, we can still keep our factories working in Canada, but we're not being hypocrites in terms of human rights.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Judy, I had a question.
Sure, Larry.
I'm just wondering, what would you do to take steps to heal the rift that's probably been festering for a long time between Eastern Canada and Western Canada? It's something that's maybe becoming a little more pronounced in recent years. Oil prices are, well, they've made things bad, and they're going to get worse after what's been happening now.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to know what your plan would be in something in regards to that.
Well, you know, I really like the advice of a local Micmac leader here, Frank Muse, and he was called in to mitigate for the conflict when the subsistence fishery was open for out of season, but it was open for the Mi'kmaq. And there was a lot of really, really angry people who, the fishermen in the local area, there was the First Nations who were trying to exert their rights after years of oppression. And he started just by looking at really talking to each person, finding out what the commonalities were. And in that case, it was like, well, you know, my cousin and your brother, they grew up and they did this together, and your sister, and, you know, making those connections, finding what that common ground is. And as Canadians, we have a lot of common ground, you know, and it's not about us versus them. It's not about, you know, against the oil workers by any stretch of the imagination. And I ran a software consulting company in Alberta. So, and working for the small oil field companies. So I have some experience with that culture. And it's not about an us versus them, but unfortunately there are players who have framed it as such in order to, you know, for their personal gain. It's about not supporting a dying industry. It's about supporting the workers. It's about supporting the people in a just transition into a green energy, that they're energy workers. I mean, there is, I can't remember the name of the group, but something steel, oil and steel or something is one of the groups that is online, that are oil field workers who understand that they need to switch to green energy. So there is a taste for that out west. it's not about, you know, the rhetoric that's coming out of the Premier's office in Alberta is very contentious, because it's always about nitpicking, and it's always somebody else to blame, instead of looking at, okay, this is the situation that we're in, and this is where we need to be. What's the best plan to get there? It's all about somebody owing somebody else. It's like, it's very unhealthy, that rhetoric coming out of the Conservative premiers and Ottawa back and forth, which is very unfortunate, because it's not serving anyone. It's certainly not serving the people of Alberta, who the vast majority, I mean, jeepers, Fort McMurray is underwater, for Pete's sakes. I mean, they have dealt with so much in that area right now. They've got massive flooding. And, you know, climate change, they're feeling it there just like we are everywhere else. And without having the leadership there that is helping them to see that there can be a just transition, and that we're not pie in the sky. We're not saying that we're going to be able to do this overnight. And yes, we are going to get some things wrong as we transition, and then we'll improve on it. Yes, we will still need to be using some oil and gas in order to do the transition, and in order to get into a better place. But we have to have a goal that we can all work towards. So finding that commonality, and then agreeing on where we want to be. What's that group vision of what Canada is going to look like? You know, and that's one of the things we have a strength in the Green Party. We know from our policies, that's one of the things I absolutely love. You know, we know that we need to be looking at decentralized local sources of energy. It makes for a much more robust energy grid, diversification across the board, having more control at the local municipal level, either through you know, municipal control of local utilities and energy production, as well as you know, things like innovative business models that will be like co-ops and the different structures that have a social impact aspect to them. I can't think of the right name right now. It'll pop into my head for that format. But if we can do that in Alberta and help, especially, like, a lot of people think that it's just the big businesses in Alberta, and it's not. There are so many small businesses, vast numbers of small businesses that all feed into all of the equipment and machinery and the pumps and all of the stuff that makes the oil field run. And all of them are going to need to be transitioning over to green energy. But I mean, look at how fast some of the industries have retooled to be supplying personal protective equipment. You know, we've shown that we can do that across Canada. And with COVID-19, it's really shown us that we can, with the political will, make those decisions at a level that we've already been talking about, that we need to have a mobilization as if we were in World War II. Well, now we can do a mobilization with a worldwide pandemic. We can do the same for climate change. But it really is going to be in education, because of so much rhetoric that's going on for not in the best interests of the people, to have them understand that this is in their best interest, that having a just transition, that the price of oil is not going to rebound. Doesn't matter whose fault it is or why, or that's just the reality of what they're dealing with right now. And that the vast majority of profits in those oil fields and for those businesses all go offshore. They don't get funneled back into the local economies. And what we're talking about in terms of green energy and building the grid across Canada is having local projects that the monies and the profits go back into those communities. So it's going to make the communities and the people even stronger and in a better position than anything oil and gas has ever done for them, without the environmental impacts that we will be dealing with for decades. You know, the first steps that we've got now, we've had a lot of pushback with the oil field cleanup as part of the COVID-19 supports for out west, because there are purists who are saying, well, the companies should be paying for that. Well, absolutely, the companies should be paying for their cleanup, but they have managed to manipulate and use the legal structures and business structures to get out of doing that. And so with the current situation we're in, it's unlikely we will ever have any rectification where the companies that caused and abandoned those wells are going to go in and clean them up. So this is, you know, an equitable step in the right direction, where we are giving the workers work in an area that needs to be done that's also benefiting the province, as well as keeping work in that province. So, you know, that's a one step in that direction, and it's an opportunity to illustrate, well, this worked here, now let's take the next step. You know, we can be doing some retraining, we can be doing the geothermal for a lot of these. I think it's about 10% of those wells across Saskatchewan and Saskatchewan and Alberta that are suitable for geothermal. And, you know, we're looking at having to decentralize our food manufacturing. So having and building greenhouses for local food production over those geothermal sources is a good combination of the two in terms of technology. And we need people to build them, you know, welders and pipe fitters and all of those skills that are being put to bear in the oil field. We need them for building this infrastructure across Canada and maintaining it. And we know from the studies that there's going to be far more employment available and more opportunities for technology as these technologies improve. So we just have to get them excited about the possibilities. You know, people are all by default are worried about stuff that's taken away from them, and they react defensively when we have to make it look like an opportunity, or make it look like the opportunity it is, rather than that we're taking anything away. This is a better future. This is a better job. This is a better opportunity to not have to travel outside of your province to be working in the north, and in, you know, the circumstances in those work camps are not pleasant. You know, how about being able to do this in your local community? You know, contributing to your community, your province, and not having to travel great lengths of distance and being away from your family. That we need to sell it. We need to sell it to them and make it very, very clear with the numbers behind it for those who need the numbers, that this is a valid option for them. It really is. It's about building that trust. You know, almost everything that we need to do is about building trust within the party itself as well as within the country.
It's very hard though. I mean, I just lost all my shifts with VON. I found work the next week, but I observed myself, the anxiety rising. So it only lasted 2 weeks for me. But if you saw your job disappearing, like Northern Gulf or any oil,
absolutely,
your anxiety will rise. And then instead of thinking positively, like, I know there's lots of work with seniors. I know there are lots of seniors that require care, but it's still, it does produce anxiety.
It absolutely does.
You're thinking negatively, you're not thinking positively.
No, and you think
it's to get into that positive frame of mind to see the opportunities. I mean, I saw when I had a mask making business overnight, basically.
That's so true, Sheila, but that's exactly how the human mind works. You know, we're either thinking with our primitive brain, and it's the fight, flight, or freeze response, which is what you're feeling when something's taken away and you're tossed down to the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or we're thinking rationally with our prefrontal cortex. And so when you are feeling or have something taken away unexpectedly, you're immediately in that adrenaline surge, you know, survival mode, and you're not thinking rationally. And,
no.
Right. And so what we need to do is we need to plan this transition so nothing's taken away before they've already been moved into or know what their next step is going to be. And that's going to be critical. The timing is going to be critical, and it needs to be done in a way that nobody gets left behind.
But it was the government that actually cancelled all the shifts in the VON. So it is almost similar to, you know, any transition that would happen.
Absolutely.
The government, in its wisdom, decided that respites in the VON, if there were family in the home, then they could do it, which is foolish because a 90-year-old husband can't do it. But so then the families have been scrambling to get care because they can't leave their children. You know, their children are working; they can't leave their parents. But it's the same kind of scenario if we transition into energy that is totally different to what we have now. Somebody has to be retrained, and there will be that scrambling.
Yeah, but
somebody would have to be retrained. Somebody would have to.
Exactly.
There's
And
a
that has to be managed.
Yeah.
Exactly, Sheila. That's what I'm saying, is that we need to prevent, I mean, that's a cautionary tale. We need to prevent that scramble. It shouldn't be left on the backs of the workers. It should be clearly laid out that you can sign up for this, or this opportunity to transition or to move into this different field. So we need to have those options out there and available for them to transition to as we are ramping down, because we're not going to shut down oil production overnight. You know, that is not going to happen. You know, there's so many petroleum products that are made from oil that can be made from the tar sands that are currently in production. You know, even in Mission Possible, it didn't talk about shutting things down overnight. Has to be a smooth transition as we transition off of oil and gas, and that we make other options more available. So where oil and gas is being made to use or being used to make a number of different types of plastic products, you know, we perhaps need to ramp up hemp production and have people retraining to be in that industry and processing hemp into alternatives for some of these plastic products, as we're no longer needing the oil for that. And the Hibernia oil, I mean, I liked what Mission Possible had to say, you know, living off of our own oil, not importing Saudi oil. And there, again, we're decoupling from that regime, which I think we need to be doing more and more so until they get their act together in terms of human rights. So, you know, nothing happens in isolation. So we have to make sure that all the pieces of the puzzle are in place and that we don't leave people behind. And Greens are good at thinking that through, that complexity. If you look at a lot of our policies and our platform and Vision Green, we really have thought about a lot of those, and we need to do it in more detail if we were to actually implement it. And things change from, like, even from last year. I'm sure there are things about Mission Possible and our platform that would need to be updated even now. They're living documents, as we used to say in computer science.
So has anybody got any other questions? We've been going for 2.5 hours. This is pretty cool.
I think we'll have to bring 2 glasses next time of beverage, right?
Okay.
Are we done?
I think so.
Okay, awesome. Madeline, did you have something to say? You're muted, dear.
Mary,
They have to unmute. It's oil people, it's oil workers. So that's been reported today. So that's why their numbers are up, I guess, with the infection. Yeah.
Oh yes, with the, I know I've been speaking out against them for months now, because it was very obvious that the living conditions in the work camps were going to be a breeding ground for COVID. I'm so annoyed that no actions were taken and that we have such high incidents of contagion in those camps, putting more pressure on those northern communities with very limited
not valuing their workers, for sure.
No, it's not valuing their workers at all, but it's also putting the local communities at risk with the resources.
And if you look at the fact that we have so many street people too, that the public health issues there.
Absolutely, yeah, with our homeless.
Are overlapping, so
that's right.
We need to look at
I saw another
as a public health issue.
It is, and there's actually another term that's different. It's not homeless. It's what, unhomed. But there's a different way of terming it, rather than when you say somebody's homeless. It's like something's wrong with them, as rather than they are just unhomed. They don't have a home. You know, it's just a subtle change in thinking that I'm rather liking. I just read about it today, and I apparently need to read it again to get it imprinted to get the terminology right. Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you all for bringing up.
Many things we have to address.
Yes,
thank you, Judy. Thank you very much.
Thanks for hanging in there. Holy cow. And for those who dipped in and out, it was so good to see people's faces too, because there's so many people that I've been chatting with on Facebook and whatnot. And sometimes we don't always have our own face on our profile, so we don't get to really see what people look like. Excellent. Thanks. And Naomi, I can't wait to see the next hats you sport. And congratulations. You're going to be a fabulous leader. You already are. Thanks, Shay. Very nice to meet you. And thanks for everything you're doing, Vince. I'm really pleased that you're spearheading these efforts to get the leadership candidates in front of as many Greens as possible.
You're welcome. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Vince.
Yes, thank you, Vince. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay,
Excellent.
I'm going to go.
Nice meeting you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Facebook friend me. It's in chat.
Isolation to be able to be together.
It is.
I put my Facebook page in chat. So
Excellent.
if you want to Facebook friend me, it's there. Okay, bye now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Sleep well.
Okay, ladies. Oh, well, that was like.
Okay, just the three of us, I think.
It is, yeah. so that went pretty good.
Yes, we're attracting different people each time, so it's kind of neat.
It is, and hopefully they will share when we have the next one.
Very smart, astute group, you might say.
Absolute, awesome questions.
Yes, very astute group. Yeah.
I
don't know where they were all from, but you probably do.
Well, there was a good presence from Saskatchewan and New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ontario.
Ontario and Nova Scotia as well.
Yeah. I think it's a good way to do it because we invite everybody and then whoever comes on.
Yeah.
And if you do it regularly, then it's a forum for them to come and ask questions, and maybe we can actually get serious about some things.
Yeah, exactly.
Develop some ideas and themes.
Absolutely. No, yeah. I love it. And it's a good opportunity, you know, people want, just like when we do elections, general elections, people want to hear from the candidate. They want to ask their questions and they want to hear what the answers are. Yeah.
Well, it's important for the gentleman to ask about the deadlines on the money and about the money. And
yep.
Inform that person. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to sign off. My husband's here all by himself. He'll be heading off to bed shortly, and I haven't even said hello yet.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Leah we can do another one if you want to in 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah, that sounds good. So we're going to put it out to Leah because Leah's filling my schedule with talks just like this for different EDAs. And so we'll work into that schedule, what will work. So maybe Sheila, with your work all over the place right now, give us a couple of dates and times that work over the next couple of weeks.
Well, Tuesday's my day off, so
okay.
Tuesday should work.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Tuesday's off. And how are you, Madeline? Tuesdays are good for you as well?
Yeah, I'm doing nothing lately.
Okay.
I didn't complain about not having any Airbnb or clients.
I'm surprised that Sheila hasn't recruited.
I have one couple I'm telephone counseling.
I'm surprised that Sheila hasn't recruited you to do sewing masks with her.
Pity help the people who get the masks I make. I might crochet them.
You know what they say about practice, right? Practice makes perfect.
Curtains about all I make. My sewing machine hasn't been working for a few years.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, ladies. I'm going to sign off now, and we'll